All right. So today I will, based on my experience and my, years, not many years, but at least 6 to 7 years of experience. Today I would like to talk about something that I am very good at, which is how to get your journal paper get rejected by the journal editors. This is the topic I'm going to share with you today. Honestly speaking, my paper constantly get rejected by journals, and trust me, I'm very good at that. I get journal rejections a lot, literally a lot. So today I'm going to share with you guys about my experience in getting rejected by journals, and if you would like to get your paper rejected as well, just follow my steps. All right? Okay. So to me, journal submissions and the whole review process is pretty much like this figure. It's like pretty much like this photo. We have the journal editors monitor the whole review process, and then at the beginning, he will send the invitation to the reviewer 1 and reviewer 2. And if they have some kind of different opinions, and then the editor may invite reviewer 3 and reviewer 4, and she just kept monitoring the whole process. And then they will give you some suggestions. And ultimately, I found that most of the time, my paper just looked like this. And after the 4 rounds or 7 rounds of reviews, and then I still have the face like that. So normally, we will have imagination that we have put a lot of effort in our work, and then we try to make every single detail correct. And we hope that we, as a researcher, when we grab our papers, we hope that ultimately we have a goal to get our paper accepted. But this is in the ideal scenario. But in the reality, normally we have editor-in-chief at the beginning. He or she will check they will decide if they want to reject your paper or not, if you are likely to survive the first screening, and then the editor-in-chief will invite reviewer 1 and reviewer 2 to review a paper, and then sometimes you have a reviewer 3 and reviewer 4, and then another editor, we call that action editor or associate editor, will make the final decision if you can get your paper accepted or not. So the whole process is very, very long process. And normally they will take, based on my experience, usually you need to spend 1.5 years from the day 1 of your submission to your paper finally got accepted, if you are really lucky. I even have the experience that I wait for the whole year until I receive my their first decision of my manuscript. So the whole process is highly uncertain, and this is the reason why I mentioned you need to develop optimistic mindsets and try to think positively, because this whole process is highly unpredictable. You will never know whether or not your editor-in-chief will like your paper. Sometimes getting a death rejection is a good news, because you don't need to waste your precious time in waiting for their decision. And the worst scenario is that you wait for a whole year until you received the rejection decision only for your first round. You even have the opportunity. You even don't have the opportunity to revise your work. That is the worst scenario possible. So, some steps to share with you guys. First of all, as a junior researcher, we often have the struggling points to decide which journal to submit to. So if you want to get your paper rejected by the journal, you just submit your good paper, a well-done paper, to a wrong journal. So this is the first thing that we should avoid. We should never do something like that. How to avoid that? We just start by checking the system. We have to read the recent issue and volume of that journal. We need to try our best to identify what kind of thing that the editors or the associate editors are currently pursuing, because every once in a while the editorial board member will change their leaders. So when they have the change in in the editors, They have different kinds of strategy. They may have different kinds of preferences in what kind of articles they would like to publish. So try to read the articles published in the last 2 years and try to make sure that your articles are in line with their preferences. So this is a very important first step to do. But no need to go to very detailed because you don't have that kind of time to really, observe every single detail. Just focus on the abstract and what kind of methodology they use, and they will give you a brief picture about if you should submit to this journal or not. And here are some effective tools, and you may feel interested in. Actually, we as a researcher, we are competing with our peers in publishing the work in academic journals, but we also the publisher themselves are also competing with each other, so that they also hope that they can publish the best paper in their journal, in their database. So I would recommend that probably you should use the technical tools they offer to you on their website. For example, Science Direct is one of the most important publisher in the academia. You can use the platform they offer called Journal Finder. So you can just simply, insert the title of your article and the abstract of your article, and you put in the keywords, and then you select the field of your research, and then their algorithm will recommend the priority of journal where you should submit your paper to. And also they will list the impact factor of those journals so you can have more information. This is not the only platform that you can use, because I assume that you already know that a journal is published with one publisher. So you cannot use the platform from Science Direct only in order to find out all the potential outlets for your articles. You need to try different kind of publisher. In management science and in the management and organizational studies, we usually publish our papers in these three major publishers. The first one is from Science Direct, and the second one is from Springer, and the last one is from the Taylor and Francis. Those are the three important publishers, and then three of them all offer the platform where you can just put in or upload your abstract and your title, and then they can recommend the most appropriate journal to you. Right. The second step to get your paper rejected by academic journal is to not follow the journal's format. Although most of management journal have the similar format, similar structure, but from time to time, you will identify that some journals actually have some special design. Especially they have, some journals have word limitation, the length limitation. Sometimes they determine it by use the number of words. Most of the time, they don't hope they have a very long article. On the other hand, some journals, they have limitation of the page. So they will ask the author to submit the manuscript with the length within the 40 pages. So no matter whenever you start writing your articles, you need to think about your potential outlets. You need to think about what kind of requirements they have. So check the author's guideline is a necessary first step to do. You have to check the author's guideline, make sure everything is followed, is fulfilled. If you do not do that, trust me, you don't even need to get to the stage of the test rejection. You will, the editorial office, they have a system. They will directly send the article back to you because of the formatting issue. So always check every single detail of your manuscript by using the author's guideline. Also, some journals have some special design, and normally we start our article by abstract and introduction, and then the next chapter will be literature review, your methodology and your results and so on and so forth. But some journal, they actually request the author to do something different. For example, this is the #1 journal in the entrepreneurship. After their abstract, that actually ask the author to submit one executive summary, which is completely different from the introduction, because they position themselves as a highly practical journal. They don't want your article only has theoretical contribution, but also they would like you to have more practical connections with the industry, especially can benefit entrepreneurs. So that for a journal like this, they will ask you to prepare an executive summary. And as for some of the journals, like the Journal of Human Resource Management journal, they also ask the author to prepare several bullet points in order to highlight the most critical points of their research. So every journal comes with different kinds of criteria. You need to make sure that you fulfill everything of them. Otherwise, you don't even have the opportunity to get your paper reviewed by the other professors. Right. Next step to get your paper get rejected is to study something that nobody cares. So you need to work on something relevant. You need to find out what is the most important and the research idea that will interest the other, especially your peers. You have to remember that people who will get the invitation to review your work are always the expert in your field. So you have to assume that they have already reviewed and read a lot of similar work. So if you do not have the breakthrough in your article, and then it is unlikely for you to get a very good result for your submission. So I would say, to avoid this problem, try to think creatively about your title of your article, and also the abstract and introduction are very, very crucial. You need to use a very concise way to explain what is the novelty in your work, and also explain your motivation in carrying out this project. So that point actually links to this one. We don't want to replicate what has been done before. In the management studies, normally we have variables. We try to identify the causal relationship between the variables. So we just try to identify the variables and run the analysis. And the most common problems of the junior scholar is that we are so easily to be blinded by our statistical results. Management studies are not hard science. It is good for us to identify some significant empirical results, but we still have to develop a very strong story behind to support that kind of result. Statistical results can be manipulated, so how your result can echo the theoretical developments is of the most important thing. So we need to try our best to identify the gap in the existing history, the existing research. So the gap usually existing in the paradoxical findings in the previous studies, or the missing link between two variables. So try your best to read as much as possible in a specific field, because it is probably the most effective way through which you can identify the gap in your research. So literature review actually plays a very important role in all of this. All right, so in case you don't know this, actually we have, this is my personal favorite two platforms. I usually use Scopus and Colibri Analytics as one of my two platforms to search the literature. And you need to, as a researcher, I think this is our responsibility and our habits to keep working on the literature review, to keep ourselves abreast with the latest developments in your research fields. Otherwise, perhaps the topic you are working on has already been done 2 years before, and you fail to notice that, and that will bring you some trouble. So try to use Scopus and journal citation reports as much as you can. I always tell my students never read the articles from the degree thesis, especially the master thesis or doctoral thesis. I'm not saying that the quality of the degree thesis are bad, but most of the time they do not, they do not go through the more robust process of journal examination, because when you submit the article to a journal, the reviewers and editors, because they want to maintain their reputation, right? So they will use a very highly restricted criteria in evaluating the quality and analysis of your work, so that the quality will be higher. And try not to use Google Scholar, because the screening mechanism, the screening function in Google Scholar is not that advanced. You are not able to sort the result of your keyword searching, so that when you search one keyword, the platform will generate tons of thousands of results. You will immerse in the whole the results that will make you unable to focus. But in Scopus and on the Web of Science, you will have the opportunity and the ability to set some criteria in article searching. Especially, you can limit the results into a specific fields. Also, you will be able to use the citation. You can identify the influence of the journal where the articles are published. You can determine the importance, the relative importance of the article easier. So actually, in the corporate analytics, they have two major products. The first one is the searching platform, Web of Science, I just mentioned, where you can search for articles. And the second one is the journal citation reports. They publish the impact factor annually. In fact, they just published the impact factor for 2020 last week, I guess. So that if you're interested, you may need to go to the journal citation reports and see if the journal you are interested in has an increase or decrease in the impact factor. But normally, they definitely have an increase this year, because the journal citation reports, they changed the algorithm in calculating the impact factor. So we can see most of the journal have a significant increase in their impact factor. So this is the interface that you are going to see if you use Web of Science. If you use the keywords such as this and entrepreneurship and user innovations, you can see that the program generates 64 articles. Let me tell you, 64 articles is nothing. Sometimes you'll receive thousands or hundreds of results. So you need to use the function of sorting the refined result well, because if you use that, the system will allow you to limit the field of discipline in the fields that you are working on. For me, because I'm the management scholar, I will set the limitation to the management and business. Sometimes I will also collect economics, so that by doing that, you can effectively reduce the result that you have to get to the more precise results. All right. The next step to get your paper rejected by journals is to build out a model that's without perfect logic. We have a term for that, tautology. Let me give you one example. Normally, we try to identify the causal relationship or the structural relationship between variables. So we may identify variable A and how variable A can affect variable C through the mediating effect of variable B. Make perfect sense. So let me give you one example. In the, CSR has already been a very hot topic, and a lot of research has been done to investigate how CSR activities of a company can influence the firm's reputation. And then when the firms get better reputations, they can have a better financial performance. Perfect logic, right? But some study also shows that it can be a reverse relationship. Sometimes just because the firm has a very good financial performance, they have the resources, they have the slack of resources, so that they are able to invest in the CSR initiatives. We all know that invest in the corporate social responsibility activities, in the short run, you may have some negative impacts on your financial reports because most of the activities are not directly related to the competitive advantage of the company. So most of the time, only the big companies around the world, only a big company with select resources, they may have the intention to invest in the CSR activities. So if our model have another kind of explanation, and then we may have some trouble because and more importantly, if we do not adopt another methodological measures to justify our model, and then this would probably be a fatal factors that get our paper rejected. So China to develop a model that could be vulnerable from the problem of topology. So the logical thinking ability is very important. Another part, though, nowadays, as I just mentioned, the reason why it is getting more and more difficult to get our paper published in a good journal is because the difficulties in research design. Previously, a lot of good research design in the 10 years ago now has been seen as a problematic research design. So here are some important steps I think that I would like to remind you. The first one is we have to make sure that our sample, if you are doing empirical study, we have to make sure your sample can really give you the valuable knowledge about the topic you are working on. If you are trying to study employees' behaviors in using the MI system and how they respond to the organizational introduction of the MI system, and somehow you collect data from students, and then this is what we call pool sampling. And if you would like to study people's behavior in using kind of e-commerce services in a country, but in your sample, the majority of your respondents are students, or they are in between age 20 to age 30, and then the sampling is problematic because your idea is to understand the nationwide individual behavior. So sampling is very important. Try to identify the correct way to target at the right sample. Also, how you measure your variable is very important. If you are not working on the panel studies where you collect data from the secondary sources from the database, if you would like to establish your own database by collecting data with the questionnaire and survey, you have to make sure that your measurements of variables are reliable. Normally, we don't really establish our own questionnaire and the psychometric scales because they will take a lot of effort. So try your best to identify the most widely used scale in the literature and get the permission from the author to use their scale. And then you can slightly adapt the scale in order to fit the contextual nuance in your scenario. And then don't forget to test the validity and reliability. Remember that if we do not have the validate and reliable variable skills, no matter how significant or how strong the finding that you have in your analysis, in your final analysis, they are meaningless because the very first step is to ensure that you have the right and correct and good measurements. And nowadays, good journals no longer accept the paper and the study based on the cross-sectional design. So try not to, still depends. If you're working on marketing-related study, it is probably possible to do that for now. But if your work is on the organizational behavior or strategy, try not to use cross-sectional design. Because if you do this, and not to mention that if you do cross-sectional design, and then also you have the self-reported data for all of your variables, and then you will definitely have some troubles because good journals no longer accept paper like that anymore. They will hope that you can get your data from different points in time, which we call that as longitudinal study. For example, you collect data in January, and after 3 months, you collect another data, and after a few months, you collect the last round of data, and you combine them together to see how the variables evolve and how the variables you collected in the early stages affect the variables you collect in the later stages. Because this is assumptions that we can test the causal relationship. And what even better is that if we can collect data from different sources. For example, we collect data from employees in the first stage, and in the second stage, we collect data from the top managers. And in the final stage, we collect data from the panel data, the performance of the whole company, and then that could be even better. But to do that, we require some resources and some connections, and this is a difficulties we have to deal with. All right. So another thing is common method bias. Common method bias is also a problem that occurs when you have a cross-sectional design. Common method bias means that, and the endogeneity problem in the next point means that we do not know that the significant relationship between your variables. Sometimes the program, your regression analysis, or your SEM will get you significant results. But if you cannot prove that your results are free from the common method bias or the endogeneity problem, it is likely that the correlation and the relationships are based on some internal contextual factors, and it's not actually the true relationship between the two factors. So we need to control for the common method bias and also for the endogeneity issues by editing meaningful control variables or by using longitudinal design. And most importantly, try not to have all your variables from the same source. There are so many techniques, but I think we don't have too much time today to go into the details. So just remember that the quality of your analysis is very crucial. All right, so another thing is we have to find appropriate way to analyze our data. There are so many tools. I don't want to go through all of them, but whenever you decide when you get to decide what kind of techniques you would like to adopt to analyze the data, always think about what kind of research question you are asking, because your research question will determine what kind of data that you are going to collect, and the type of your data will determine what kind of techniques you are about to use. Sometimes we have, if you have a very complicated issue to analyze, scholars are now encouraging the mixed methods. You can combine the qualitative case study and plus one quantitative study in order to generalize more reliable and more convincing, probably more interesting results. Also, you need to be very careful about the level of your analysis. I have reviewed a paper that collect data from middle manager in the organization, and then somehow the dependent variable are the general performance of the organization. So somehow, how come a manager of a company, of a very giant company, an individual response can influence the performance of the whole organization? It is very awkward and very, not very reasonable way to put it. So definitely the paper got rejected. So never always think about your level analysis. Either you are focusing on the national level, or you are focusing on the organizational level, or team level, or individual level, because only we will always use higher level variables to influence the variance at the lower levels. And when you think about the level analysis, that will determine the source of your data. So everything actually is interrelated with each other. And as I just mentioned, now people focus a lot on the quality of the research, especially analysis. So now if you read the top journal articles, you probably will notice that now they have study 1, study 2, study 3. And all of this effort are for making sure that the robustness of their research results are good. So they probably will do their study 1 in a country, and they will do their study two with exactly the same model in another country, or they will do their study three by using the panel data as a surrogating variable in order to find the consistent results. So if you are targeting at top journals, perhaps you need to think about how you are going to test the robustness of your research results. All right, so discussion session is also very important. I review a lot of work, and I also be in the panel of students' final defense a lot. I always found that some people are not doing quite well in the discussion sessions. They ignore to mention the novelty in their work. They just describe what they have found. And basically, there's no differences between their result section and discussion section. The purpose of discussion session is about we need to identify what is new in your paper. So, which means that we need to compare your findings with the previous and relevant work. How you can either echo their work or supplement their gaps, or you can try to challenge their previous assumption. For example, I'm doing the creativity research. Many years ago, people always feel that extrinsic motivation, like rewards, monetary rewards, reputations, or job duty, could be a kind of hindrance to individual and employees' creativity. But a few years ago, one groundbreaking study, they overthrown these assumptions. They found that as long as the extrinsic motivation is in line with individuals' intrinsic motivation, actually, extrinsic motivation can enhance individual creativity to a whole new level. So the combination of intrinsic and extrinsic motivation could be more important, and the alliance between them could be the most important indicators and determinants of employee creativity. So you can definitely, based on your results, to challenge your previous research, but you need to point it out in your discussion session, because that is where we can determine the novelty and the theoretical relevance of your work. All right, so in the review process, if your goal is to publish your paper in the journals, ultimately you need to negotiate it with or communicate with journal editors and the reviewers. The worst thing to do possible is to fight with your reviewers. They are your reviewers, and that they are not your enemies. So let me give you some tips. Try not to, I would say that I also got my paper rejected all the time. So from time to time, we will feel that oh, come on, this reviewer is what is he or she talking about? This is a stupid question to ask. Sometimes they may ask stupid questions, but don't worry about that. Just explain that with patience, because you are the only expert in this article. So the reviewers, even though they are in your fields, but even in the field of creativity or even in the field of technology management, the topics are still broad. They may not have the cultural understanding or the contextual background that you have. So if you encounter some stupid questions or nonsense questions, still reply them with good manner, because sometimes the stupid questions may lead you to think about some variable ideas, or sometimes they give you a very good suggestions, but their tones are not less friendly, make you feel like that this is a kind of criticism. But just think positively. Criticism is always the opportunity for you to improve your work. You just see the positive points in their arguments. And but ultimately, if you have experience of journal submissions, you probably know that you always receive many pages of reviewers' comments, especially if you submit to the top journals. I used to submit one of my papers to the top journals in the management fields. I was so surprised the comments that the reviewers share with us. I got 4 reviewers only for the first round, and each of them written about 6 pages, so that altogether I have something more than 20 pages of comments on reviewers. And not to mention that the Asian editor even provide his comments. So altogether, I have only for the first round of the review, and then I got around 30 pages of comments. But frankly speaking, this is very variable to submit to the top journals, because I would say that they are true experts in the fields, and I do learn a lot from all of the comments, even though they are quite sincere, because they decided to reject my paper in the first place, but they still are willing to contribute a lot of their time and effort in generating this long reviewers reports. Even though the paper didn't get to publish in their journal, but I really appreciate that experience. So try to appreciate the criticism from your reviewers. The whole reviewing process is all about persuasion and diplomacy. All right. So you need to try to use a very nice tone and try to persuade your reviewer that why you are doing this in this way. Most of the time, they will ask you to do some revisions, and if the revisions are possible, just do it. And of course, if you are willing to do that, just do it. If the revisions are not possible, for example, like they ask you to recollect the data, or they ask you to re-interview the respondents, which are not possible for you to do at the moment, you just mention that in the limitation section. And also, you need to prepare the response letter to the reviewer well, because when we submit resubmit our paper, we have to respond to every single detail of their comments. So that you need to, if you cannot do it, you need to explain why. And you also need to mention that even though we are not able to address their concern at this moment, but we mention that in the limitation sections, and hopefully the future study can work on this great idea. So always try to think from the view of the reviewers. All right. So this is the reason why I learned a lot from all the reviewing experience that I have in the past few years. Even though this is definitely the hard work to do, because if I want to review one paper, probably they will spend the whole day of mine to carefully read the article and write down and write the reviewers reports. But this is a very rewarding experience, because when you write the paper, we always have our blind spots. But when you become the reviewer, you will probably have a better position to think from their shoes. So you should always accept the invitation to become a reviewer for a journal if you ever receive the invitation from them, because that is the moment that you can think from the reviewer's shoe. So that benefit actually that benefit me a lot, because after I have years of reviewing experience, when I become the author, when I work on my own paper, and sometimes I mean all the times I write a lot of stupid mistakes and I write a lot of stupid arguments, and immediately I will have a warning sign in my brain. Okay, I cannot do something like that, because if I'm a reviewer, I will hate a sentence like this. I need to revise. So being a reviewer actually comes with a lot of benefits, and so you should try to receive this kind of invitation and try to accept that as much as you can. Right. So if you want to prepare the table for the reverse response, try to make their job easier, because most of the time you may have a lot of details to revise, so that your manuscript may look like a chaotic presentation. So I would recommend that you try to use different colors to highlight what is different from the previous version, and make their job easier. Also explain in very detail in your response to reviewers. All right, so these are some funny pictures. Normally we submit our paper like this, but after the few rounds of review, your paper may look like this. Different reviewers may come with different kinds of opinions. Trust me, it is very natural. So as an author, you should decide, if you want to take the suggestion or not. But if you don't take the suggestions, you need to justify your decision. Okay, so I would suggest that even though I know that you guys from India, your English writing is definitely very good, but take typical English writing is quite different from the academic English writing. Here are some tips. I don't want to go through each and every one of them. Please scan the QR codes and you can download a very detailed, I would say, the very detailed instruction for academic writings. Simply put, just try to make your writing as simpler as possible, because we don't want to create a very beautiful sentences, but that is so too complicated to understand. So we always use a very straightforward sentences to convey our findings. Remember, we are writing a scientific report. We are not working on the novel. So try to make your words easy, and always go back to your previous writing before you submit your paper, because after a few days you may have come up with another creative way in revising your work. So always go back to read and revise it, read and revise it, and keep working on this process. And then this is probably the way you can improve your work. And also try to avoid redundancy. I want to point it out, because redundancy is a very common problem for junior scholars. I did it a lot, because when we don't read a lot of articles before, we always feel that okay, this article makes a lot of sense, and their findings are very interesting. I want to include them all in my writing, but ultimately you are going to generate a giant article. So try to integrate their findings in your mind and use your own words to interpret that in order to reduce the redundancy. Okay, so finally, I would like to share 3 critical rules for writing a published article. Actually, it is very simple. Again, rule number 1, think about your audience. And rule number 2, think about your audience. And rule number 3, think about your audience. Writing a journal article is about initiating a communication with your audience. So you need to think about what kind of theory you are communicating with, what kind of reviewers you are going to, who will review your article. So think about your audience. Think in their shoe. What kind of topic they will feel interested in. All right. So here, the final points are some tips. I think is the habits we can develop as a junior scholar. If I were you, I'm still trying my best to do that, even though as a teacher, we have to teach a lot, but I still try to get back to my research work on the daily basis. We normally have a misunderstanding of our working habits. We have a tendency to just prepare. A lot of my students told me that they would like to spend the whole weekend working on their own thesis, and then during the weekday, they just want to focus on their coursework. But this is not like that. No matter how short it is, even the 5 minutes will be very variable to your research work. Because if you do not touch your paper on a daily basis, and after, let's say, 1 week, and then you go back to your research work, you have to spend a lot of time picking up what you have done before. And we have some working memories. If you wait for too long, and then you will lose all the working memories. So try to go back to your work every single day. No matter you just read some writings or just add 1 sentences, add 1 references, they will be fine. But just go back to your current project every single day. And we have to find our way to be focused, because writing is a very mental centered activities. If you cannot focus your attention, I think you may have some problems. So just forget about your Facebook page or Instagram page. Just turn it off and just turn your cell phone into the mute mode. Don't let the messages disturb your mind and disturb your focus. We need 100% focus. And don't try to have some kind of misunderstanding that you want to work for 10 hours a day on your research. According to psychological and neurological studies, normally, on average, people can spend no more than 2 hours with their maximum level of attention. So just give you some pressure. I want to fully focus on my study within the next 2 hours, and that's it. After 2 hours, just take a rest and do something else. Because I'm assure you that after 2 hours, you can hardly generate some creative and interesting idea, and you cannot get any inspirations. So just give you a limited amount of time on a daily basis, but during that period of time, you have to force yourself to focus on your work. And daylight could be very helpful. Some study shows that when you approach to daylight, your productivity and creativity will significantly increase. So always give yourself a deadline. Always give you the timetable that some milestone until these days I'm going to finish what part. So this is, I find conference paper is very helpful because even though our ultimate goal is journal publication, but by submitting your paper to conference, you are going to get your first deadline. So by using a deadline, you have the pressure to submit to the conference. And even though the work is not perfect, but at least after the conference publication, you have something to work on for your journals. So using some deadline will be very helpful. Another point is I will always establish a structure of my writing. I will break down every single details of my articles to several sections. For example, in introductions, before I start working on writing the manuscript, I will give myself some hints about what kind of elements and their orders that I'm going to include in the introductions as well. And I also do use the same method to the rest of the paper. So always give you a guidance for your writing. Make your writing more structural. You know, English in its nature is a very structural language. So in addition to just start from introductions, literature review, method, results, or discussion, we have to have some breakdown elements in each section. And more importantly, we have to move around through different sections. Sometimes when you are writing your literature review, but you have suddenly identify one great article that you should put, or one great argument that you feel that you should put in the introduction, and then just go to your introduction and just do it right away. Otherwise, after 10 minutes, you'll forget about that. So a nonlinear writing strategy is quite crucial and important. And always learning from the top journals in your field. So I'm not quite sure what kind of field that you're working on, but always try to learn from the writing skills, the logics from the top researchers, and also try to observe their robustness of their research design. In my field, I always go to the journal citation report, which I introduced earlier today. Just use the name or keywords to search the journal in this database, because in this database, the system will generate the ranking in your fields. For example, this is the ranking of the journal in the management field, so that you have something to make sure the quality of the journal. For example, right now, Academy of Management Annual is the second best journal in the field, and its impact factor is around 16 points something. So that by judging this, we can know that, well, okay, this is something where I should learn from. Or we can also follow the perspective in those journals to advance your work. And if you collect the name of the journal, you can have more detailed reports of the journal's performance. You can identify the highly cited articles in that journal in the recent years. And if the articles are relevant to your work, that is the work that you should read. All right, next one. It's a very important one. Never have any plagiarism problem. We are scholars. We are researchers. We have to maintain the highest ethical standards for ourselves. So we have to do everything in our power to prevent any kind of unethical conduct in the research. So never plagiarize other people's work. And sometimes we have a misunderstanding that, okay, I just copy and paste the guy's work and I just put a citation after the arguments. To me, this is not the best way to do, because ultimately, this is still the whole structure of the writing of the sentence are still from the previous scholar's work. So if I were you, I would try to integrate the ideas from different researchers and use my own words, use my own sentences to say them out. Another thing is we have to avoid self-plagiarism. A lot of people feel that I used this sentence originally from me, so I can use this sentence in the future in different articles. But apparently, this is not acceptable in academic community. So if you want to use your previous previous thoughts, you still have to find a way to rephrase your idea. So this is very important thing to do. Never have any kind of ethical problem, because reputation is the most valuable asset as a scholar, especially to junior scholars. Next is you gotta need a team, because if you always do your study alone, you will feel lonely, and you don't have people to cheer each other up, and you easily be limited by your personal blindness. So try to find researchers with a common interest in your fields and work with them. And not to mention that if you are working in a team, you have the deadline, because definitely you are going to exchange deadlines when we are going to finish that, we are going to finish that. So the teaming up together will create the synergy that working alone can never have. And next thing is always think positively, because as I mentioned for so many times, it is very, very common for paper to get rejected in the journal submission. For top journals, according to the statistics, they receive more than 1,000 articles in a year, and the rejection rate is around 95%. So this is normally to get your paper rejected. You just need to make sure that whenever you got rejected, you revise it based on the real valuable comments from the reviewers, and then you just find a new home for it. Because if your research is with high quality, don't worry about that. You just do not submit to the right journal. Ultimately, you can find a home. Don't forget about that. There are already 250 journals in management fields and 190 something journals in business fields. Not to mention that there are more than 300 journals in economics. So you can ultimately find a home for your journals. It's a matter of time. So don't feel upset. Just think positively, because this is only thing we have. This is the very first important mindset we as a junior scholar need to develop. Okay, so at the end of my presentation and my talk, I would like to share a quote from my favorite scientist, Albert Einstein. The most important thing is not to stop questioning. Curiosity has its own reasons for existing. Being the scholar requires a high level of curiosity. We have to find our best ability to be curious in the field that you're interested in. We are, as a kids, we are born with the kind of power, but somehow in the process of our education, in the process of our getting adult, we lose this kind of magical power. So I will encourage all of you guys to try to get your imagination and your curiosity back. Try to ask as many questions as possible, because that is the only thing that can give you higher creativity, not only in the academic research, but also in your life. All right, so this is some brief introduction of myself and some ideas of my experience of doing research as a junior scholar. I hope that today's talk is somehow useful to you guys. And if you guys have any question at all, you can simply scan the QR code, which will link you to my personal page, or just email me if you have any question that you cannot ask today. But anyway, I would like to wish you every success in your academic career. If you would like to become a professor, or if you are already a professor, I wish you every success in publishing your work in a top journals. Thank you very much.